Chicago's South Side, March 8, 1953. Dean Martin was 35 years old, still climbing, still trying to prove he was more than just Jerry Lewis's straight man. He'd been booked for 2 weeks at the Riviera, a club owned by men who didn't ask questions and didn't like answers. And on the 5th night, a gang leader named Tommy the Blade Marcetti walked in with a loaded .38 Special on his hip and decided to test the new singer from Steubenville. What happened in the next 4 minutes didn't just change Dean's reputation in Chicago. It changed how he thought about fear, about power, about who he really was when everything was on the line. The club that swallowed men whole. To understand why this moment mattered, you need to understand what Chicago was in 1953. The war was over, the city was booming, money flowed through the South Side like water through broken pipes, fast, dirty, and dangerous. The Riviera Club was ground zero for that money. Technically, it was a legitimate nightclub, music, dancing, cocktails, but everyone knew the real business happened in the back rooms. Gambling, loan sharking, worse things that people whispered about but never said out loud. The club was owned by a consortium, a polite word for a collection of crime families who'd agreed not to kill each other as long as the profits kept flowing. Dean Martin needed the work. He'd just split with Jerry Lewis 6 months earlier. The breakup had been ugly, public, messy. Dean was the straight man. Jerry was the comic genius. That was the narrative. The press ate it up. Now Dean was trying to prove he could carry a show alone. No pratfalls, no slapstick, just him, his voice, and whatever charm he could muster. The Riviera booking paid $2,000 a week, good money in 1953, enough to keep the lights on, pay the divorce lawyer, send money back to his mother in Steubenville. But the Riviera came with rules. Show up on time, don't ask questions, don't look at the wrong people, don't talk to the wrong people's girlfriends, and above all, don't disrespect the men who owned the place. Because in Chicago in 1953, disrespect could get you disappeared. The man with dead eyes. Tommy the Blade Marcetti ran the South Side for the outfit. Not the whole South Side, but enough of it to matter. Protection rackets, numbers running, the occasional enforcement job when someone forgot to pay what they owed. Tommy got his nickname at age 19 when he carved up a rival gang member in an alley behind a butcher shop. 37 stitches. The guy lived, but he never forgot. Nobody who met Tommy Marcetti ever forgot. Tommy was 34 years old in March 1953. Short, maybe 5'7", but built like a fire hydrant. Thick arms, thick neck, hands that looked like they could crush walnuts, and eyes that looked like they'd seen everything and been impressed by nothing. Tommy liked the Riviera, liked sitting at his usual table, third from the stage, where he could see everything, and everyone could see him. It was about presence, about power, about reminding everyone in that room who really ran things. He'd heard about Dean Martin, the singer trying to make it without his monkey. That's what Tommy called Jerry Lewis, the monkey. Tommy thought it was hilarious. On March 8th, Tommy decided to come see what all the fuss was about. He brought 5 guys with him, not his crew, not the enforcers, just friends, guys from the neighborhood. They took up 2 tables, ordered whiskey, and settled in to watch Dean Martin try to entertain them. Dean saw them come in. You always saw them. The way they walked, the way other people moved out of their way, the way the club manager personally escorted them to their table. Dean knew who Tommy Marcetti was. Everyone did. But Dean also knew the rules. Don't acknowledge them. Don't ignore them. Just do your job and hope they have a good time. The show was going well. Dean had opened with That's Some More, moved into You're Nobody Till Somebody Loves You. The crowd was warm, responsive. Even Tommy's table was nodding along. And then Dean made a mistake.
The joke that changed everything. Dean was between songs, chatting with the audience, building rapport. He'd learned this from watching other performers. Keep them engaged, make them feel like they're part of the show. Someone at a back table yelled out, "Sing O Sole Mio." Dean smiled. "You want Italian? I'll give you Italian. My mother used to sing this one while she was making gravy." It was a throwaway line, harmless, the kind of thing Dean said every night. But then, he added, "Of course, she also used to tell me, 'Dino, don't trust nobody who smiles too much. They're either selling something or hiding something.'" The audience laughed. Light, easy laughter. But Tommy Marsetti wasn't laughing, because Tommy Marsetti smiled constantly. It was his trademark, the smile that never reached his eyes, the smile that men saw right before bad things happened to them. And Dean Martin had just made a joke about not trusting people who smile too much in a room full of people who knew exactly who smiled too much. The temperature in the club dropped 10 degrees. Dean felt it immediately, the shift in energy, the way Tommy's table went quiet, the way the club manager's face went pale. Dean tried to recover. But what do mothers know, right? They also said I'd never make it in show business without Jerry. Another laugh from the crowd, but it was thinner now, nervous. Tommy Marsetti stood up. The entire club went silent. Tommy wasn't a big man, but when he stood up, he took up all the space in the room. His presence expanded like smoke filling a closed room. He walked toward the stage, not fast, not slow, just walking. His 5 friends stayed seated, watching. Dean's grip tightened on the microphone. His heart was hammering, but his face stayed calm. That was his training. Never let them see you sweat. Tommy reached the stage, climbed the 3 steps, stood maybe 6 feet from Dean. The silence was absolute. Tommy's hand went to his jacket. Everyone in that room knew what was inside that jacket, the .38 special that Tommy carried everywhere, the gun that had ended at least 3 lives that the police knew about. But Tommy didn't pull the gun. Instead, he reached into his inside pocket and pulled out a silver cigarette case. He opened it, pulled out a cigarette, put it between his lips. Then he reached back into his jacket, and this time he did pull the gun. The .38 special on stage. The gun was black, a Smith & Wesson .38 special with a 2-inch barrel, standard issue for Chicago cops, which made it ironic that Tommy carried one. He held it casually, pointed at the floor, his finger not on the trigger, but close enough. The audience froze. Some people started to stand, thinking about running, but Tommy's friends at the table shook their heads. "Stay seated. Don't move. Let this play out." Tommy looked at Dean, that dead-eyed smile on his face. "You got a light, Mr. Martin?" Dean understood immediately. This was a test, a power play. Tommy wasn't going to shoot him, not here, not in front of 200 witnesses, but he was going to humiliate him, make him acknowledge who had the real power. Dean was supposed to back down, apologize, maybe even leave the stage. That's what Tommy expected. But something in Dean snapped. Not the explosive kind, the quiet kind, the dangerous kind. Dean looked at the gun, then at Tommy, then back at the gun, and Dean Martin reached out and took it. The entire room gasped, actual gasps, audible shock. Dean took the gun right out of Tommy Marsetti's hand, smooth, confident, like Tommy had offered it to him instead of threatened him with it. Tommy's face faltered just for a second. Nobody disarmed Tommy the Blade Marsetti. Nobody touched his gun without permission. But Dean wasn't done. He examined the weapon, turned it over in his hands, checked the cylinder, 6 rounds, all loaded. "You know," Dean said, his voice carrying perfectly through the silent room, "my old man taught me about guns. He worked at a steel mills back in Steubenville. Dangerous work. Lot of guys carried protection." Dean looked at the gun, then at Tommy, back at the gun. And Dean Martin had something he never forgot. He said, "Dino, a gun is a tool. That's all it is. It's not magic. It's not power. It's just metal and mechanics. And a tool is only as good as the man using it." Dean held the gun up to the light. "Let everyone see it. This is a nice piece. Smith & Wesson. Good weight. Well maintained. You take care of your tools, Tommy. I respect that." Tommy's face had gone from smiling to blank. Dangerous blank. Nobody talked to him like this. Nobody touched his gun without permission. Dean continued, "But here's the thing about tools. They can be used for building or they can be used for breaking. And the choice, that's not in the tool. That's in the man." Dean looked directly at Tommy, eye to eye, equal to equal. "So the question isn't about this gun. The question is, what kind of man are you, Tommy? Are you the kind who needs a gun to get respect, or are you the kind who earns it?" The call that changed everything. 3 days later, Dean got a phone call. Frank Sinatra. "I heard about the Tommy Marcetti thing. That true?" "Yeah." "You took his gun?" "Yeah." "And he kneeled?" "Yeah." Silence on the line. Then, "You're either the bravest man I know or the dumbest. I can't figure out which." "Probably both," Dean said. "I'm coming to Chicago next month. We should talk. I'm putting together something. A group. Me, you, Sammy, if he's interested. But I need guys I can count on. Guys who don't fold under pressure." "What kind of something?" "The kind that changes everything. You interested?" Dean thought about it. About Tommy Marcetti's gun. About standing on that stage. About choosing to get big instead of small. "Yeah, Frank, I'm interested." That phone call led to the Rat Pack, to Vegas, to everything that came after. But it started with a gun on a stage in Chicago and a choice to stand his ground. The lesson nobody taught. Years later, in 1978, a young comedian asked Dean about the Tommy Marcetti story. By then, it had become legend, embellished, exaggerated, but the core remained true. "What were you thinking when you took the gun?" the comedian asked. Dean took a moment. "I was thinking about my father, about Steubenville, about growing up around guys who thought power came from intimidation. And I realized something in that moment. Real power, the kind that lasts, doesn't come from making people afraid. It comes from knowing who you are when someone tries to make you small." "So you weren't scared?" Dean laughed. "I was terrified. My hands didn't stop shaking for an hour after the show. But being scared and being yourself, those aren't opposites. You can be both." What would you tell someone facing their own Tommy Marcetti, their own moment of truth? Dean thought carefully. "I'd tell them this. Everybody in life is going to try to make you smaller than you are. Some people do it with guns. Some do it with words. Some do it with silence. But the moment you accept their version of you, you lose. Not to them, to yourself." He paused. When Tommy put that gun in his jacket, when he asked for a light, he was defining the moment. He was saying, "I have the power here. I'll decide what happens next." And if I'd accepted that, if I'd backed down, I would have accepted every limitation anyone ever put on me. So what did you do? I redefined the moment. I took the tool he was using to intimidate me and turned it into a conversation about what kind of man he wanted to be. I gave him a choice, Be the guy with the gun, or be the guy people respect without the gun. And he chose respect. He did, because deep down, that's what everyone wants. Not fear, respect. But most people don't know how to ask for it without the gun.
The legacy of 4 minutes. Tommy the Blade Marcetti died in 1969. Heart attack. He was 50 years old. Dean went to the funeral, flew to Chicago, sat in the back of the church, didn't make a scene, just paid his respects. After the service, Tommy's wife found Dean, Maria Marcetti. She'd been married to Tommy for 28 years. "You're Dean Martin." "Yes, ma'am." "Tommy talked about you, about that night at the Riviera. He told that story at least once a month for 16 years. Dean nodded. He was a good man. Maria smiled sadly. He was a complicated man, but after that night, something changed in him. He started asking himself that question you asked. What kind of man was he, builder or breaker? And? He tried to be a builder, didn't always succeed, old habits, old life, but he tried. And when he died, he wasn't carrying a gun anymore. Hadn't carried one in 5 years. He said he didn't need it. Said Dean Martin taught him that tools don't make the man. Dean's eyes got wet. "I didn't know." "He wanted you to. He told me, if I die before Dino, tell him thank you. Tell him that night saved me." The truth about courage. The gun that Tommy Marcetti pulled on stage that night in 1953 never fired a shot, but it changed 2 lives forever. It made Dean Martin realize he was stronger than he thought, that he could stand alone, that he didn't need Jerry Lewis or anyone else to validate him. He just needed to be himself, completely, even when a gun was pointed at the floor 6 feet away. And it made Tommy Marcetti question the only kind of power he'd ever known, the power that comes from fear, from intimidation, from making people smaller than they are. On March 8, 1953, in a mob-owned nightclub on the south side of Chicago, 2 men had a conversation without words, one with a gun, one with courage. And somehow, impossibly, they both walked away bigger than they'd been before. That's not just a great story, that's a blueprint for being human. Because courage isn't about not being afraid. Courage is about choosing who you are, even when being afraid makes sense. Dean Martin was terrified that night. His hands shook, his heart raced. He knew Tommy Marcetti could end his career with a word, his life with a bullet. But he also knew something more important. If he got small, if he backed down, if he let fear define him, he'd never be able to look at himself in the mirror again. So he got big. He took the gun. He redefined the moment. He gave Tommy a choice to be something better. And Tommy, to his eternal credit, took it. That's the Dean Martin story that matters. Not the martini, not the Rat Pack, not the movies or the music or the effortless cool. The man who looked at a loaded gun and said, a tool is only as good as the man using it. The man who gave a gangster a philosophy lesson and walked away with both of them stronger. The man who proved that the most powerful thing you can do is be exactly who you are, even when everything tells you to be smaller. That's not just courage, that's character.